Hello.
Hello.
Howdy. Welcome to Hugo Girl, a Hugo Award-winning podcast, in which we read, watch, discuss Hugo Award-winning properties and other adjacent things, and also things we like, especially if they're about boats.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Amy.
I'm Lori.
This is Haley.
Today, God bless, we are talking about the novella Blood of the Dragon by George R.R. Martin, which was published in the July 1996 issue of the magazine Asimov's Science Fiction and won the Hugo in 1997. Blood of the Dragon comprises the Daenerys Targaryen chapters of Game of Thrones. The novella was basically a teaser for the Game of Thrones because Game of Thrones came out like 2 months later.
Yeah.
So, any chit chat?
Got 2 reviews.
Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo.
So the first one
Pew-pew-pew.
was an update from Pete6123.
Oh, he came back around?
Yeah, Pete came back around and said,
Just kidding, I don't like it.
positive review. You asked for it. It's true. We do. And so it says, still fun to listen to y'all. And isn't that really the point? Thanks.
It is the point.
Yeah, I believe that Pete6123 had previously said, fun, funny, friendly, and fresh, if I remember
I like
correctly.
the alliteration.
Yeah. And then we got another one, a new one from Triffid Eater. Yeah.
Like the movie, Day of the Triffids.
What's a Triffid?
It's like a horror movie.
Oh, I thought of Tribbles.
Star
This
Trek.
whole time I've been thinking of Tribbles, and I thought, they're very furry. I wouldn't want to eat one.
Yeah, no, there's a movie called Day of the Triffids, and it's like a
Yes.
60s,
I forgot all about
That's
Monster.
like a perfectly obscure name because 1 out of 4 people knew what it was. Or did you know what it was? Okay, 2 out of 4 people knew what it was.
That ain't bad.
So it's like obscure enough to be cool, but not so obscure that nobody gets it.
Yep.
A+. So, Triffid Eater, not Tribble Eater, says, there's a good bit of resentment directed towards SFF literature from the feminist community, and justifiably so. This podcast addresses these volatile issues head-on with neither apology nor whitewashing. Despite the incendiary nature of the backdrop, these 3 space feminists keep the vibe positive and upbeat. Each episode is a pleasure to listen to, with many being deeply edifying. Thanks for the great content.
That's my favorite part.
I know.
We're deeply edifying.
Man, I'm just over here talking about butts. That's so nice.
In a deeply edifying way.
It's so nice.
They're breasts, mama. Everybody has them.
Carrietta Bradshaw. Telekinesis in the city.
Telekinesis. In the small town Maine.
Yes. All right, Amy, you gonna summarize this plot?
Oh, I'm
Take
gonna
us away.
summarize the crap out of it. What I'm really going to do is steal the summary from Kogiopsis on Goodreads. And she says, "Oh, Danny. Danny. I could write a dissertation on Danny and everything that went wrong with her story, but I don't have that kind of time." For those of you not familiar with this most epic of George R.R. Martin's characterization and plot failures,
Oh, dear.
here's a summary.
I think I read this one.
When we first meet her, Danny is 13 years old and is about to be sold, effectively, into marriage with Khal Drogo, a warlord of the Dothraki people, by her abusive and not a little bit crazy brother, Viserys.
Viserys.
Viserys has convinced himself that Drogo will help him take back, quote-unquote, his kingdom, this being the 7 kingdoms where the rest of this book takes place, this book being the Game of Thrones. This was technically a Game of Thrones review. Hence the whole selling his sister to be raped, married to someone he obviously sees as a barbarian thing. The marriage occurs, and then the wedding night happens in truly squicky half detail. Then there follows a long journey across the plains to a Dothraki city, during which Dany is raped, and no, I will not call it anything else, by Drogo. By her 14th birthday, she is pregnant. When they arrive in the Dothraki city, Viserys makes such an ass of himself that Drogo kills him by pouring molten gold over his head in the middle of a feasting hall. Robert, the current king of the 7 kingdoms, who the Targaryens see as a usurper, sends assassins to kill Dany. Naturally, they fail, and Drogo gets so angry at this that he decides to commit all of his people to attacking the 7 kingdoms in retribution. They leave the Dothraki city. At this point, Dany is heavily pregnant, and go out to wreak havoc across the countryside on their way to conquest. In one such battle, Drogo is wounded. Because he refuses to care for the wound properly, it gets infected. When it is clear that he is going to die, Dany appeals to an old woman to perform forbidden magic to save him. The rest of Drogo's people do not approve and try to cast Dany out. End result, Dany loses her child to create a Drogo zombie, which she then smothers. When his body is placed on the traditional pyre, she adds in 3 supposedly dead dragon eggs given to her as wedding gifts, and which any fool could see hundreds of pages off were bound to hatch. And surprise, surprise, they hatch.
Chekhov's eggs.
The end.
Yep.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
Yep, that's about right.
So I think
I will say it leaves out Jorah Mormont coming in. We love, Jorah. Jorah's Jorah. I like Jorah.
that's the first thing I wrote was, you know who's great? Sir Carlisle. So I think before we get started, our understanding of Game of Thrones is heavily affected by watching the TV show and also watching the shorts Game of Thrones, which is Jonathan Van Ness's. That's what got him famous. That's what got him eventually the Queer Eye. But he does little 3-minute summaries of episodes starting with season 3 on, and he has nicknames for people, and it's very funny, and it's highly recommended. But
They're
yeah.
so good.
Do you remember Daenerys's?
Christina Aguilera.
Oh, that's right.
So the shtick of Game of Thrones is that he's just cutting someone's hair for 3 minutes, and they're like, "Oh my god, did you watch Game of Thrones?" And then they just like go back and forth, but he doesn't know what's going on and doesn't know any names. So like Cersei is blonde Cher, and Arya is baby Kristen Stewart. So
Baby Kristen Stewart. I forgot about that
yeah,
one.
those might sneak into our discussion, but they're fun. So
I forgot about Christina Aguilera.
Blonde
so good.
Cher is also really good.
You guys know that I saw, Kevin and I saw Jason Momoa at the Earl, which is a dive bar in our neighborhood. And it was like early days of Game of Thrones. So I was like, oh, that's that guy from Game of Thrones. And I just don't think I've said this before on the show. I didn't appreciate what I had in that moment.
Oh,
He was just
Man.
smoking a cigarette outside the Earl. I mean, I walk by
He's a
there
handsome
every
man.
day.
He's a handsome-ass man.
My dogs are friends with every person up there. If he was there today, I could stop and I'd be like, well, you're at my restaurant. You have to say hi to Drogo. You have to give my dogs a tater
you're in
tot.
my hood. Pet my dog. Pet my dog now.
Yeah.
I'm curious what everybody's relationship is with the book series versus the TV show versus this novella.
First, when I was married before, my ex-husband was reading Game of Thrones, and he was very frustrated because there were not enough dragons in it. He was like, I thought this book was going to be about dragons. And then I'm going to be so embarrassed if this was actually a conversation that I had with Kevin. I'm going to be so embarrassed. Some husband that I had was reading it.
A different one?
Well, I've had two. And they both read Game of Thrones. So I just know that I was sitting next to a man I was married to who was reading Game of Thrones, and I glanced over and I saw, like, it just jumped off the page at me. A dwarf's cock has magical properties. And I was like, what the fuck is this book? Do you remember that, Kevin? Okay. I thought
prehistoric husband.
I thought it
number
was
one.
prehistoric. I thought it was him, but I was going to be super embarrassed if Kevin was like, that was definitely me.
I read Winds of Winter on your
You have never read Winds of Winter.
Yeah,
no
that's
one
not
has.
out yet, famously.
Oh yeah, this is
Feast for
going down in
Crows.
history. Kevin's read Winds of Winter, guys.
We'll fix that in post.
No, we will not. You leave that in there.
What was the last book?
Clash
Been
of
so long.
Kings?
No.
Feast for
It
Crows?
was,
Feast for cows.
No,
No.
it was.
I don't know.
Winds of
a
Winter?
dragon something. Hold on.
It's like those Sue Grafton books. N is for news.
I read the last one on your Barnes and Noble e-reader thing, so I think you would already
Dance with Dragons.
Dance with
Ah,
Dragons.
Dance with Dragons.
You okay? Barnes and Noble e-reader also given to me as a gift by my prehistoric husband.
I didn't know that.
So many connections to him.
I didn't know you had it that long.
I left my Kobo on a plane recently.
Not my Kobo. I have a Nook. I have like a Barnes and
Oh,
Noble
gotcha.
Nook, like old guy.
Okay, so you have sat next to men reading this book.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to share that about the dwarf's cock because I was like, for God's sake, I was like, I'll never read this. And then I started watching it with Kevin. We watched a couple episodes and I was engrossed. And so then I read them all very quickly and have been waiting for Winds of Winter ever since.
What about you?
I was at a friend's house and they were like, this show is the next big thing. And I watched it and I liked it, which is in the fantasy realm, which I'm not usually a fan of. I do like the show. I watched season 1 and then I was like, well, I got to start reading these books. So I picked up book 2. I think I read half of it. I think George R. R. Martin is just not my guy. But
I can't tell. I can't see why.
I tried really hard, but like I think it's like how I just didn't want to read the Theon chapters.
Yeah, that's fair.
But like every couple of like maybe once a year, I'm like maybe I should start from the beginning and just like get. But I just never follow through.
So you like the show? Books didn't grab
Love
you.
the show. Love the show.
Books didn't grab you. Okay.
Love the show. Yeah.
I had, much like Dune, I read the Game of Thrones books because of a boyfriend. Because I'd never really read a fantasy, but like a high fantasy type book. Although I don't know whether this really qualifies, but
As high fantasy?
yeah.
Yeah, the only definition of high fantasy is it not on Earth? And low fantasy is it on like it's like a different world. Yeah, I was surprised by that. I thought high meant fancy.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
But it actually is like
I knew what I meant by
setting
that. Yeah.
related.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Because it's kind of like dirty medieval, but
But also not Earth.
Yeah.
And there is magic somewhere somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's definitely England.
So I read them all very quickly when I started reading them because he told me they were great. I loved them when I first read them.
Me
I have
too.
now read all of them like 3 times almost, I think each. And then the show came out and I celebrated by hosting Medieval Feast for
Aw.
my boyfriend at the time and some of our friends. I did it for the first episode of 2 seasons in a row, and then I no longer had that boyfriend and I didn't care anymore. But and by then the show had made me so mad that I didn't want to do it anymore. I kind of hated the show in a lot of ways. I think it's probably the problem with reading the books, but
I liked both of them a lot, but I sometimes really hated the show. Like there was a whole season where I just watched Game of Thrones because I was like, well, I'm tired of all these rapes.
so many
And
rapes.
the books are
there's lots of rape in the book, though, right?
There is.
there is more rape in the show than there is in
Yeah.
the book.
Well,
Which
it's
is
harder to
weird,
watch,
which
too,
is
probably.
funny because one
That's
of the
true.
things I read about this, in particular, this scene or this part of the book, was that so George R. R. Martin wrote the wedding night for Dany and Khal Drogo. In the story, ends with them going off on their horses and getting to some beautiful place, and he sort of seduces her.
Yeah.
And then she eventually says yes. Now, whether that's
Sure.
consent or not, we could quibble. But
Statutory rape.
If you pretend she's 25, it would be a perfectly
she says
fine
yes,
scene.
right? In the show, that very much did not happen.
No, I was so angry when I saw it in the
they
show.
made it a straight on assault. In the
Absolutely.
show.
They also aged her up, though, so made it a little bit less worse, in my opinion.
Well, in the sense that she wasn't 14, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they definitely made it like violent. She was upset.
She was crying.
hurt. She was
It was
crying.
bad. Yeah.
So both of these have big problems.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
like
And that is the first thing I'd like to talk about.
I just that the scene I was really angry at how they changed it for the show because I'm like, if you're going to age her up, but then you're like, but we still want you to be very upset, so we're going to make this very violent.
So I'd like to know whether you buy this. So they were filming the show, and they originally, I believe, either had filmed a scene that was like the one in the book, or they were planning to film a scene like the one in the book. And they say that it just didn't make sense that they would have that moment that was like consensual, and then immediately go to basically marital rape for the next like couple weeks at least, because and they talk about it very clearly in the book that that's what happens. Like
yeah, that's true.
she gets straight up assaulted every night. She has these bad saddle sores still expected to put out.
It's logical, but shitty. Like,
Well, they said it didn't make sense for the relationship. And then Emilia Clarke apparently also said the same thing, that it didn't make sense for the relationship for her to like agree and have this soft moment with him and then just immediately flip around. Now, I think it could make sense because Khal Drogo is Khal Drogo. And even though they had this nice moment in the beginning, he could very well not see that as a thing that needs to continue on for whatever reason.
Yeah. Or maybe the cultural norm for a wedding night is different.
Yeah, who knows?
I mean, I think that there would have been other ways to make that quote unquote make sense
Yeah.
in the narrative.
So
But
you
you
don't
know,
buy
it's
it?
just easier to make it. I mean, I feel like that's a thing that you can do that makes sense, but there were also could have been other things that they could have done.
They also don't have to show it.
Sense.
yeah, like, I keep thinking today when I was thinking about this and preparing, like, what would this series be like if it was written by a woman? Because one of the things I wrote down was, I don't think we've ever read a book more obviously written by a man. Like, it just, I feel like his weird energy. I don't know.
All right, so on that note, goodies from Goodreads.
Yeah.
Oh,
we
God.
forgot.
Oh, my
Yeah.
God.
I kind of launched in, but
We're still drunk
on that
from
note,
Mark Hugo.
on that note, goodies from Goodreads. What you got?
So this is kind of long, but it's what we were just talking about. Is there any actual goddamn reason George R. R. Martin couldn't have added 2 or 3 years to all the kids' ages? That would have put most of them between 15 and 17 in the first book, which is still achingly young, but more reasonably so. And less creepy in the case of Dany, who was pregnant by 14 in these books, and readers seem to be torn about her sex scenes with Khal Drogo, especially the first. Yes, he explicitly asks for her consent, but, she is 13, which might be old enough, culturally speaking, in Westeros and Essos, but not in 21st century Earth when we are reading it, or 20th century Earth when it was written.
Right.
I mean, I will say, I think it may have been a deliberate choice for him to make it something that was very complicated that people would think about.
And I do think, I want to give George R. R. Martin enough credit that I think he can write nuanced things. And I think that, yes, he probably had a nuanced idea about the way he wanted this to play out. I don't know if that's enough to be okay with it. I don't know. I have one really funny Goodreads from Goodreads, and then I have more serious ones. So one of them was J.G. Keeley on Goodreads said, "It's like seeing a Playboy at your uncle's where all the pages are wrinkled."
Ew.
That's basically this whole story.
Yeah.
And then the second one was, I think this was the same person. So there's a quote. "She wore faded sand silk pants and woven grass sandals. Her small breasts moved freely beneath a painted Dothraki vest." That's a quote from the story. And then the reviewer says, "Imagine the process. Martin sits, hands hovering over the keys, trying to get inside his character's head. Okay, I'm a woman. How do I see and feel the world differently? My cultural role is defined by childbirth. I can be bought and sold in marriage by my own. Oh, hey, I've got tits. Man, look at those things go. Wishing memory sound effects. Okay, time to write."
So this is... Oh, are you done? No.
Well, she sums it up. She says, "This book felt male-oriented in a way that is so painfully forced that it made me distinctly uncomfortable. I don't mean that women can't enjoy it. Obviously, as all the reviews I linked back at the top demonstrate, they can and they do. I mean that the book itself felt as if it was written for the most stereotypical male audience imaginable."
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of breasting boobily.
Do you know how many times? 36
I would
times
love
in
to know.
75 pages.
Did you also count Doug's?
Oh,
I did not
you
count
got
Doug's.
my boob talk.
It's
Yeah.
also my
I think it's only in there once.
still.
But
still,
it's so
it
funny.
stands
Very
apart.
memorable.
I laughed hysterically. And I said to Kevin, I don't know why I know what this word means.
Oh, it's a
Why do I know what
I know what it is
Doug's
because of Latin class.
Yeah,
When I took
yeah.
Latin, we had to translate the story of Romulus and Remus. And there's a point at which they suckle at the teats of the wolf, and they use the word Doug's in the translation. That I
in
was
the English translation?
You know,
How funny.
y'all haven't watched House of the Dragon, right? So I love it. I think it's corrected a lot of the flaws from Game of Thrones, especially with regards to women, because I think we talk a lot about how using rape as a plot point is complicated. I don't ever want it, but I guess George R. R. Martin thinks it was a great way to kick off a novella. So I think he's trying to use it to showcase the barbarity of the Dothraki in particular. And I think of Westeros as a whole in the entire book series. But in House of the Dragon, you see, I mean, there's still lots of incest, it's fine, whatever. But in terms of how they treat women, it's a little different. And I think it's better. Like, there's one point that still showcases the women's lesser role. And one of the main characters, I forget which one, a blonde Targaryen lady, she goes, our women's battlefield is the bedroom, because they show a really graphic birthing scene in the first episode, and they're just like, holy shit, this is really horrible to give birth before modern medicine. So I think they just do a little bit better of a job than the first season, especially of Game of Thrones, or season 6, which was just pure rape. So
I think the reason that quote from that particular review stood out to me is because there is something very prurient about the way that the sex with Dany and Drogo is described to me, and it brushes really close up against white girl, black man to me. Small, innocent, very white girl.
Yeah.
Silver-haired, purple-eyed white girl. Very young, very fresh, very innocent. Huge, strapping man of color, basically, who is having his way with her. And it's very voyeuristic and very prurient to me, and I really did not like it.
yeah, it's shitty.
So I was thinking about the way that the Dothraki are portrayed as barbaric, and especially their sexual mores and how they differ from those in Westeros. But then, of course, we get to Westeros, and it is every bit as
That's
bad.
true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I'm not saying
Just less horses.
This in a vacuum
fine,
is
have
weird,
all
but-
your rapes.
Yeah.
But I do think when I was reading this, and I was like, this seems kind of racist. And I mean, maybe it still is. Maybe it's both. Maybe it is racist and it's showing through a Westerosi lens, we're looking at this look at these barbarians. They just have sex out in the open. And then, we get to Westeros and look what Ramsay Snow does to people.
Yeah.
Look out, Robert Baratheon raped Cersei. Cersei sexually assaults, I think, one of her girlfriends. I mean, there's just rape going on constantly amongst the Westerosi nobility. So yeah, it's gross all the way through. And I don't know if he was trying to say, look at them gazing at these people as the other and as savages, and they're doing the same thing. They're just doing it in a different setting and calling it civilized.
Yeah, I don't think that particular part of it stood out to me when I first read it, because these chapters aren't all together.
Exactly.
And,
yeah.
and it's interspersed with all this bad shit that's going on in Westeros, right? So you
Yes.
don't really see it, I think, the same way as when you read it like this. when you
Yeah,
read it
I
all
think
together.
that's right.
And in a vacuum, right? It's not
Yes.
surrounded by that other stuff. So,
Yeah, that's exactly right.
although you are seeing what Viserys does to Daenerys, which is not that much better.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, boy, Viserys, he's a real cartoon character. It's funny. I kept
He has
thinking while I
zero
was-
nuance. Like,
well,
no.
while I was reading
batty.
this, I was like, why do I like this so much? Because I do really like it.
Yeah.
And I do think that in spite of all the breasting boobily and it being very obviously written by a cishet white man, I love Dany as a character.
She's
I love
great.
Brienne as a character. When I was reading this, I would skip to the Brienne chapters because they always
Brienne.
have the focal character at the beginning of the chapter. They have their name. And I'd get to the end of a Brienne chapter and I would just turn the pages till I got to the next Brienne
Yay.
chapter. So I really like these female
Be an interesting way to
characters,
read the whole book series.
Yeah.
even though there is so much breasting boobily. And where was but so that brings me back to Viserys though. Viserys, did you know that you might wake the dragon? I started keeping a tally at one point, but I started
He wants
like
his
halfway
crown, Lori.
through.
He wants his
I-
golden crown.
You know, I think he was aping. She would have her bell. He's like, I've got.
So I told Kevin, I said, he's like Bob Dole. He's always referring to himself in the third person. The dragon does not tolerate this. The dragon does not accept your orders. The dragon, sir,
I wish I had an ounce of his confidence.
you're just a little fella. You're just a little fella. You're not a dragon.
What's that saying? Give us the confidence of a mediocre white man.
But
A mediocre Targaryen.
I love oh my God. I love the part where Dany suddenly sees him for what he is and she's like, he's pitiful and he's always been pitiful.
Yeah, he was
And
never going to take
just
this.
like suddenly the wool is pulled from her eyes and she's like, oh, he's a pitiful thing.
And then she just doesn't care when he dies.
Good for her.
Why I think I like the show better. Like obviously books are, have more detail and nuance and thought, but like the show was well done no matter what. Like, yes, it's problematic, but like when they pour the gold, oh, it's so
Yeah, and
it's
the
a-
dragons
very
and the
real.
costumes.
The
I mean, this show is what made me like some dragons.
Oh, I remember
That's
that. You're like, these.
true.
I don't like all dragons, but I like these
I
dragons.
love these
remember
dragons. I
that.
could not tell you why. I love these
Well, they're
dragons.
very ferocious.
But they're also cute little babies. I was watching the episode where she becomes the
Oh, they're so tiny.
the unburnt
The mother
like,
of
One is like
dragons, yeah.
suckling. I was like, what is she, do they drink human milk? That's weird. Whatever.
She's the mother of dragons. They can drink her milk.
So tell me about why Targaryens don't burn.
I mean, I think there's a little bit of magical realism going on.
It's just like
yeah.
Fire is in their blood.
Fire is in their
They just
blood.
can't
Haley,
get burns.
they're the dragon. Did you miss?
Don't wake the dragon,
How
Haley.
could you miss that? They're
I
the
thought
dragon.
it was a metaphor. because
It is and it isn't.
because but if she didn't get burnt, then why did Viserys get burnt with burnt
Well,
gold?
she's connected to the dragons, right? So there's,
Oh,
I
he's
think
not?
the
Okay.
implication is that there's some connection between her and these
Gotcha.
eggs,
and
and
she's the dragon.
she's
He's
the real
not.
dragon. He's not.
I thought they were just full of hot air.
Well, she's very clearly says he wouldn't have burned if he was the dragon. So it's not him.
touche.
That's right.
If you played a Viserys calls himself the dragon drinking game, you'd get very sick.
You had alcohol poisoning.
And
yeah.
here's
We'd all be in the
another
hospital.
another drinking game that would send you to the hospital. The phrase "the stallion who mounts the world." What a way to refer to a fetus.
So okay, does it mount the world in the way that a stallion mounts a mare?
I mean that.
Yeah, I think
or does
so.
it mount the world like the way we mount a horse?
I don't think a horse is going for a ride. I think it means it.
So it's fucking the earth.
Yeah.
Well, and then in a third way, like they use as punishment, like my writers would mount her to like it just keeps going back
He's
to this
fucking- that
animalistic.
stallion's gonna fuck the earth.
Yeah,
so
yeah, the
gross.
stallion who mounts her. And I kept thinking, is that what we want for our baby?
Well, that's what Danny wants by the end of everything.
Oh,
Well, and I think he could have painted the Dothraki in his weird animalistic way without all of the sexual assault. Like,
Yes, he could have.
one of my favorite lines, and it's in the show too, is like, and I've
He
always
could have been
remembered it.
racist without being so sexist.
Right.
Yeah, but like he says like it's considered a dull wedding if less than 3 people die at your death. Like, there's
Yeah.
ways he could have done it that would have been memorable and different, but no, he's like, we just got to go back. We're gonna more essay.
Yeah. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to critique this because it's so.
It is, yeah.
But I love the show. Like, I love
and
the
I
characters.
love these books. And I
Yeah.
kept thinking, why do I like them so much? He says, "Wake the dragon 7,000 times." Viserys is like Snidely Whiplash. Stallion who mounts the world 7,000 times. Little girl getting married and pregnant. And
How
I don't know
many
why I
times
like it so much.
did they have to describe this woman as a child? Every
Yeah.
time someone wanted to do something to her sexually, she was described as a child.
And I do
Drives me crazy.
imagine So I think, I'm going to try to give him credit for making a deliberate choice that is supposed to make us very uncomfortable. But then again, I also imagine George R.R. Martin over his typewriter typing out the phrase budding breasts. And he isn't like, is this a bridge too far? Budding. Aw, she's not even her full adult height, George.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to your question is because it's incredible world building. It's incredible characters. There are arcs that
the
are
question
fascinating.
about why she likes it, or the question about why there's budding breasts.
Yeah. Why do I
Why do you like it?
Why do I like that?
But also, he likes boobs. I mean, that's very clear.
Even tiny ones.
He wants to finger a nipple real bad.
Oh,
Man, he sure does.
He's like, you got to squeeze it. Girls like it when you squeeze the nipple.
Real hard.
I don't
real hard.
know. He uses that as an example of abuse.
Yeah. Well, it's hard
Khal
to tell
Drogo
which
does
is
it too.
which.
When he's
Well, I guess it means context matters.
I mean, I
guess.
I want to believe that every depiction of sexual assault.
I just imagine the poster. I want to believe behind you. When you said that. Sorry.
I want to believe that every depiction in fiction and TV and movies of sexual assault is meant to be like giving a lesson, but I don't think that that's the case.
So I read a bunch of think pieces about this today and George R. R. Martin in general. And one thing that I was reading a lot about was that George R. R. Martin was very deliberately setting up Dany to be this sort of like a person that you're rooting for the whole time until you realize what a terrible person she's become. And then you realize you've been sucked right along with it. Like you've sort of been on her side until you realize that you've been rooting for all these atrocities she's been doing. Suddenly you realize
So many war crimes.
She's definitely gone too far. She wants to do all these things that you don't want her to do. So, I mean, if you read this in terms of like a villain origin story, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's the credit I want to give him. That
She said trauma.
if he's doing this to show her trauma, if he's doing this to show how her perception of the way the world works was created, then sure.
I would believe that if no other woman was raped in the books, but so many are.
Well, and then of course the apologist would say there's a reason for all those rapes. Like it's showing XYZ thing, or it's like whatever. I mean,
how else will we know this man is a bad man?
That's the only way you can be a bad man. Yeah.
it's true that women were raped, so why shouldn't it be in the book?
And we come to that point a lot, and it's just like, because it's not fun.
I don't want to read it.
I don't want to read it. There are people who are victims that could be triggered. It sucks. I don't know. I think it's lazy storytelling personally, but that's me.
It is. I think it is too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's often lazy storytelling. I don't think it always is, but I think it often is.
And it is prurient.
I think it is often shorthand for, this is a tough world, it's a tough life, and it's like, well, you could demonstrate that other ways, or even in additional ways. Like that, there could be like, you could do two different ways.
Yeah, like the thing that Viserys says, like, I would have the entire Dothraki army mount you. Like, we get it.
God.
Rape is a tool in this society, and I guess it's a tool in every society, but like, why do you have to talk about it so much, bro?
Yeah.
One thing I think Dany represents, so George R. R. Martin, there's a quote I read from him today. I had read before, but it says, it's in Rolling Stone, I think. I don't necessarily think there are heroes. That's something that's very much in my books. I believe in great characters. We are all capable of doing great things and of doing bad things. We have the angels and the demons inside of us, and our lives are a succession of choices.
Did Brienne ever do anything bad? I don't think
We
so.
love her.
That's a good question, actually.
She's just a hero.
I mean, she killed a lot of people, but for decent reasons.
I mean, she's very quick to pledge her sword to someone and then go around killing people for that person without asking any questions.
We'll put a pin in that. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's just what I was getting around to before. I mean, like if you want to read Daenerys' characterization from a, what's the word I'm looking for? Sympathetic viewpoint, I guess.
Yeah.
Then I guess he's showing her good and bad side, and he shows it very clearly in this very small amount of time. Right? She learns how to like love the Dothraki. She has a very big capacity for meeting people where they are. She's humble in a lot of situations, but imperious when she needs to be. But she's also got this budding ruthlessness in her, which is really interesting to look back on and see when you think about the way like the show ended, and especially in people's reaction to that.
Yeah, because she goes pretty quickly from, I'm just a little girl, and then all of a sudden she's like, I'm unburnt, I have dragons, fuck y'all can leave, you can stay.
Right. And I mean, all in the matter of months.
Oh yeah,
Like it's not even like a year, I think, that this whole thing takes place.
Yeah.
Is she a little Mary Sue?
Oh, is it? Is this a Mary Sue situation?
Well, is that what happens if you're too good at things? You go mad eventually.
Yeah. God, when she rides those dragons when they get big, oh, it's so good.
When it's cold and she's got that cool coat on.
Yes. Oh, it's so good. Yeah, I had 2 talking points.
Okay, here's a note that I made.
Okay.
So at one point, she's observing everybody at the feast where Viserys gets his crown of gold. And she notes that there are men whose braids are even shorter than their manhoods. And that made me think of that meme about how a news station reported that there was a sinkhole that was the size of like 11 dishwashers or something. And the whole internet was like, Americans will do anything to avoid the metric system.
That's true.
Your braid is not even one penis long.
Westeros definitely used the imperial system. Yeah.
Well, should we go on to our segments?
Yeah, I just feel like there's so much of the story is centered around whether or not Dany's being raped or not, and like her just dealing with her brother. And it's hard to, without talking about the entire series, it's kind of difficult talking about this.
Well,
I think
something that struck me about this and seeing her early story in isolation, I was thinking about her age and how I wish they had made her older. And, if that wedding night scene between her and Drogo, had she been 25, you'd be like, oh, this is like a pretty good illustration of consent.
Yeah.
But she's 13, so it's very fucked up. But I was thinking about her age and how I think part of that is why she is successful, because she's a little girl. So anyone will say anything in front of her. They don't view her as a threat. They view her as a bargaining chip, as an adornment. And so she's probably spent her whole life making herself small, but watching and listening and understanding and absorbing all this stuff. And then at a point when she finally realizes she has the agency to use it, she's got a whole lot of skills that really, I think, come from her being so young and being a girl and being totally powerless. So there are some reasons that it makes sense to me that she is as young as she is. And, I think it's meant to be complicated and it's meant to be upsetting. And whether it's fully successful, I don't know. But I think it's probably an intentional choice for you to read that and be like, I don't know how to feel about this. Because, he's also an author who will kill your favorite character.
Sure will.
And most authors won't do that. You'll be like, oh, well,
he's
they're
always gone for impact. Like, he's made no bones about that. He's like, I killed Ned because people didn't expect Ned to die.
Right.
That's his reason.
Right.
And I think also, two things about that. I think it's interesting that he shows her on the way to the wedding, I think. He talks about how she notices Illyrio's like their benefactor, and she notices his disingenuousness. Like he'll be talking to Viserys and egging him on or whatever, pumping him up, whatever, and she notices that he's sort of chuckling to himself or he's doing whatever. Like she knows not to trust these people, even though Viserys has no kind of foresight whatsoever. And so I think he's showing in these little moments over and over and over again that she's very perceptive, that she can read a situation, that she's probably right to be terrified.
Yeah,
and I think that's right. I think he's trying to set her up as a person who's, learning as she goes, right?
And she has to be able to read a situation. I mean, that's something that you see with victims of abuse. They know how to read a situation because that's how you create safety for yourself.
You don't want to wake the dragon.
Yeah, you don't want to wake the dragon. And so she's been in an abusive relationship, whatever it is, with her brother her entire life. And she's been at the mercy of people just kind of throwing her a bone. So she's become very good at reading people, probably giving them what they need in the moment for her to be safe, for them to like her. So she's really developed a lot of manipulation skills, which is, manipulation, we hear that as a bad word, but I mean, we all do it all the time. In any situation, people are engaging in manipulation, and it's not necessarily a negative thing, even though we think of it that way. But then, eventually she ends up very warped and the manipulation all goes awry.
And that kind of makes me think of like, so her whole relationship with Khal Drogo, like eventually, she's calling him my sun and stars, and she's his moon of his life or whatever. And they, by all accounts or all appearances, have some sort of, if not loving, at least mutually respectful relationship.
The show really shows them falling in love, which I like.
So that's my question is like, do you, and there may not be an answer, but it's like, if you start a relationship in the way that they started it, do you ever have agency in that situation or not?
I think it probably depends.
Yeah.
If I could ask the Dothraki witch for one wish, it would be for us to be able to read this without having read the books or seen the show.
Like I think that coming to this new.
Yeah, well, I remember reading it I remember reading it for the first time, and I remember loving. I thought Dany was a really well written character. I was on board with what was happening to her. It seemed terrible. Then she made lemons out of lemonade, and then then she came into her power, and that was amazing. Like I was right along on the the ride the whole time. Like I'm glad I read it before I saw the show, because that wedding night scene was impactful to me. Like I remember reading that and being like, okay. Like maybe it'll be okay. And then it was really not for a while, and then it was again. And I mean, I was right there. I was right there with it. So, and now I read it differently.
Yeah.
Especially because we've been doing this podcast, so it makes me read everything differently. But at the time, I was like, yeah, she made the best of a shitty situation, and she learned more about him, and they have whatever relationship it is that they can have.
I did wonder what they talked about.
They can't talk. Well, there's one part where this is just bad writing too. At one point, it said she was teaching Khal Drogo words of the common tongue, and so he said, "What means this name?" Right? She's naming her kid, and then she goes off on a little speech about what the name means. I was like, how did he understand any of that?
Well, I mean, people certainly understand a lot of a language before they can speak it themselves.
Sure.
And
Sure.
she did say that he was a quick study when he wanted to be. So
She's
if
great
she
with
was
languages.
talking to him in the common tongue, like if she's
just
talking to him in
chattering
the
all the
common
time.
tongue and
Yeah.
he's talking to her in Dothraki, then probably both of them understand a lot better than they speak. I'll allow that. Okay. I'll allow that.
Okay,
Objection
okay,
overruled.
counsel. Okay,
They've
counsel.
been writing together for months at that point, hadn't
true.
they?
Maybe
Oh, yeah.
they just have a really good
Yeah, 'cause
physical
she's-
connection.
yeah.
They got Nevias Dothrak and done all the thing.
Yeah. And met the Dosh Colleen and their withered
The
doves.
crones. There's a couple good crones
Oh,
in
the
this
crows.
story.
Mary, I love
There's
her.
Mary, and then there's the
Josh
Josh
Colleen.
Colleen. What do y'all make of them? Are they in prison or are they powerful? So the story behind them, in
Both.
case y'all haven't read this, when you are married to a Khal, one of the like warlords of this Dothraki, the people, when your husband dies, you basically get sent to this city, and you become an elder, kind of like a respected elder, but you basically have to live there with these other old women, and you don't really have much of a choice. So it's an interesting idea. Is this a prison or not?
Listen, don't threaten me with a good time. I have
I know,
to go
I'm like,
retire
yes.
and hang out with my girlfriends. Oh no!
With your
they should have a podcast.
with your withered dugs.
I forget which culture it is, but there is one culture on Earth where like widows were just killed along with their husbands. So I think
This is better.
this is much better. This
I
is like
guess.
surprisingly benign for the
Are those
Dothraki.
our only choices? You can die with him, or you can go live in this mountain.
You could go live with weird Barbie.
Oh, they were all weird Barbies.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, feminist fave.
The monkey's claw bargain with the witch. She's like, "Oh, you want him to come back to life? He's a zombie. I'm gonna take your baby. Fuck all y'all."
Y'all kill my people, I kill you. Here's how it
Also,
goes.
to continue discussion about rape, because that's what this podcast is apparently about. This
Sorry, everybody.
this episode. Danny was like, "I saved your life," and she goes, "My entire world is dead. What did you save?" Like, she has this great speech. She's like, "I saw the butcher's boy head cut off, and my best friend's murdered. I don't know." So she's like, "You didn't do me a favor."
I think that's a very formative moment for Dany too, because then as she goes forward and starts her own Khalasar and starts taking out everybody, she's very cognizant about leaving cultures intact and not just murdering everybody from head to toe. And I think that's where it comes from.
That makes sense.
That's
yeah,
always been my theory.
I love the witch. I think she's such a big part of her development. Yeah.
Also, that conversation passes the Bechdel test, or does it? Because they're talking about Drogo.
I have to read it word for word, but I would give it to it too.
Does this book pass the Bechdel test?
No.
Damn it. I don't know. Does she talk to any of her handmaids about anything that's not Khal Drogo?
No.
Or her fetal stallion who mounts the world.
At least not in this novella, but maybe further on in the
Maybe
book.
later. I think
No, because she
eventually
talks-
it does.
She talks to Miss Sandy eventually about
Yeah, eventually she talks about conquering the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because eventually she doesn't have a lover. So there's nothing else to talk about.
also Miss Sandy is Solange in Game of Thrones.
Solange. Guys, misogynist moment?
Wait, do you
Oh,
have
I'm sorry,
a feminist favorite?
Well, that was kind of mine. Just the crones in general was
Yeah.
kind of mine.
Okay. I have two. Can I do two, please?
You sure can.
Okay. I have when Viserys scoffs at the clothes that she had made for him. She had these very nice Dothraki clothes made for him because he's just wearing his Westerosi clothes and they're ragged and smelly. And everyone laughs at him and no one likes him. But it's not because of his clothes, it's because he sucks. And so he scoffs at these clothes and then he says, "Next, you'll want to braid my hair." And she just shoots right back, "You have no right to a braid. You've won no victories." Oh, burn. Huh, burn.
Red to filth. Red to filth.
And then the other one is at the end when Jorah is still referring to her as princess, and she's like, "Why do you call me that? You called my brother a king, and he's dead. So why are you calling me princess?" And he was like, "Oh shit, I'm sorry, queen."
Sir Carlisle.
I mean, she had some badass moments. I mean, her eating that horse heart
Yeah.
is a pretty badass moment.
I like her.
Yeah, I love Dany.
Yeah,
And maybe things will go differently in Winds of Winter.
maybe.
Maybe she's like, I'm sorry for all the horrible things I've read.
Maybe she'll be like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to colonize anybody else. I don't think I'm going to kill anybody else. I think I'm going to marry my hot nephew.
Oh,
And we're just going to go have sex in the snow and it'll be fine.
I mean, winter arrives and it's fine.
Listen, it gets cold there. They need to cuddle.
She's gonna wear her nice jacket.
I love her jacket.
Oh, I love seeing her on those dragons.
Her jacket?
In the show when it's cold and she has her cold weather dragon flying jacket, it's incredible.
I like her
It's
full
like
leather gear.
Alexander McQueen jacket. Yeah, like White House Black Market.
I think one of my favorite things about the characterization of Dany in the show was that as the show goes along, she starts braiding her hair more and more elaborately because of the Dothraki influence. Have you ever noticed that?
that's cool.
Oh, because she's winning
everything-
battles.
With every battle she wins,
I
it gets
didn't know.
more and more elaborate. It's really cool.
When they finally, spoiler alert, get to Westeros on the boats and the dragons and the horses on the ships, oh, it's so good.
It's so good.
I love that show. Ugh.
Ugh. Ugh. Okay, misogynist moment. What you got?
How much time do you
I know. Should we just do that whole thing again?
Yeah.
Mine is
Roll it back to the top.
when she says if she doesn't eat the whole heart, her child might be stillborn, weak, deformed, or
a
female. And I realize also that that's a shitty swipe at having a disability. The comparison to being dead, disabled, or female. Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm a third of those.
It's ableist and sexist.
I think what I said earlier, it'd be easier to list the non-misogynist moment parts.
Remember that time Viserys didn't twist her nipple?
Yeah, that was great.
There was something about when he told her, I would let all 40,000 men in his Khalasar and their horses rape you if it would get me what I want. There was something about that line, which is like, it was so much. It was so cold. It was so hateful.
Well, I think he kind of sealed his fate because then it's like, well, why should she do anything nice for you?
Oh, yeah.
She's just going to
I
sit
mean-
and watch while your head gets melted.
Yep.
Oh, just disgusting. Ugh.
And he had deserved it.
Here's your crown.
And then, like,
So good.
melts
I
his
love
head.
when they call him the Sorefoot King and the Cart King. I love that.
Do you have anything specific or is it just the whole book?
Just the whole thing.
That's fair.
Boob talk, you guys.
You guys spoiled mine with
I'm
the
sorry.
withered
I
dogs.
also spoiled my own because that was mine
Withered
too.
dogs. It's so funny.
And they're flapping around or something.
They are swaying back and forth under the painted vest, Amy. They're swaying back and forth. Do your boobs hang low? Do they wobble to and fro? Can you tie 'em in a knot? Can you tie 'em in a bow?
Can you throw them over your shoulder like a continental soldier?
Do your dogs hang low?
Dun, dun. You're welcome, everyone.
I think I remember it from like a T.S. Eliot.
Oh, the Dougs. Just the word
I
Doug.
just remember it from like English class in college. Like
Everybody
dogs.
call in and tell us where you first heard the word Dougs.
Where were you when you first discovered Doug's existed?
1-800-HUGO-DUGS.
Doug talk.
Oh, we had Dirty Pillows talk shit. This
now we have a new
Doug's talk.
Doug talk. Oh, man.
Dug yourself a hole.
Oh, I have another one, actually.
Excellent.
I have another one. George, stop saying lower lips.
Lower lip.
The cold water in the lake crept up her thighs and kissed her lower lips.
And she was anointed with perfume on her lower lips.
Lower lips.
Stop doing it.
At least twice. At least twice.
They're called labia, mama.
All women have them.
Lower lips. Stop it.
Lower lips.
Stop.
Lower lip.
So the first time I read that, I was like, that's not what. Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, there's worse things that we've read for
Oh,
referring.
for sure.
But like, it's just like he
Lower lip.
He got on a lower lip kick.
when people say it like that, and I think about it too much, it sounds like they have another face between their legs. Like they have a whole mouth.
Don't you? That's where my lower eyes are.
And my nose.
And
Your
my
lower nose.
and my lower teeth.
Vagina dentata. Fantastical food. What you got?
My favorite was, and I know that he does food well in the
He
books
does.
throughout,
Eventually, he does. Yeah.
but I liked her simple meal of fruit and cheese and fry bread. I love fry bread.
I want that. I want
Yeah,
that meal.
Same.
I have the roasted goat with sweetgrass and fire pods, which I assume are like habaneros or something.
Yeah.
Fire pods basted with honey, melons, pomegranates, and plums, and some queer Eastern fruit. That's your queer representation in Game of Thrones. There is queer Eastern
It's a
fruit.
banana.
I also like the The idea of horse meat roasted with honey sounded kind of good.
Is this a fantastical food / pony prattle?
Oh, I was going to say the Dothraki are such horse
So I had the Dothraki. So my the synopsis that I had written, if I did not read the one I stole off the internet, was that Daenerys, he hatches a plan to sell Daenerys to the Dothraki warlord Khal Drogo, who has a horse girl.
They are such horse girls.
I love their horses.
It's because you said that earlier this
A cow who cannot ride is no cow.
Oh, man.
They also drink their clotted mare's milk.
Well,
That's not a phrase I love.
also, I would say there was also a lot of fantastical smells in this book. Every time they walked in anywhere, there was a whole new smell. Things smelled of
wonder if
lemons and
part of
cinnamon,
why-
et cetera, et cetera.
These are so compelling is that they're so evocative and so engrossing. Like, if you read this, you're really there.
In a non-oppressive fantasy way, like in a good fantasy way.
Okay.
Because I like
Interesting.
that. Yeah. I
What
don't
do you
feel
think
oppressed.
is the difference?
I don't know.
Because, I mean, objectively, this is a
yeah.
book with
true.
swords and sorcery
I
and
know.
dragons
I
and
can't explain it.
everything. And at least one can't say that.
Ooh, what was it going to be?
I'll tell you later.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's hard to pinpoint why this
Yeah.
one's... Is it because there's so much politics?
No, because I don't like politics either.
Yeah.
I think...
But you did like the books, though.
I don't hate the books, but they're just not my thing. I don't think they're horrible or anything.
I do think the characters being really complicated helps.
I think it's also... I love the actors that portray them. It really helps. I just think they do a great job. And like...
It was well cast.
It was well cast, and I just grew to love the character so much that I think it's just it doesn't make any sense. I think because it's not cutesy, like there's lots of things in Lord of the Rings.
It's not, what did I call it?
There's not like there's lots of breakfast, but there's no second breakfast. You know, there's lots of weird names, but
It's like not self-referential.
it's just not cute
or something.
Yeah, like
or self-aware fantasy or something.
That's what I called it, cheeky fantasy.
Cheeky.
Yeah.
It's not cheeky fantasy.
Yeah.
Not
like,
cheeky.
Yeah.
there is weird names, but it's Kevin Lannister, not Bilbo Baggins.
I find that
or whatever.
funny.
Uncle
Yeah.
Kevin. Yeah, I find it off-putting when
I
someone's
find
just
like
named
when
Kevin.
you have a Cersei and a Sansa and an Arya and then a Kevin.
Yeah, funny.
that was a real
Not that there's
moment in
anything
Game of
wrong with a
Thrones.
Kevin.
Yeah.
When they're
But
like,
it's-
Kevin. And he had like a whole montage of Uncle Kevin. And they're like,
At least it's spelled differently.
yeah, Kevin.
But yeah, so I think we just figured it out. Way to go, team. It's not as cutesy as Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
And you know, in Tolkien's defense, it did all start as a children's book.
Yeah, touche. These are definitely not children.
He never quite got out of that, even though he was writing about a lot of people dying.
Also, watching
Which
the
is fun.
show, that last episode of season 1 again today at lunch, the score is fantastic. Do, 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 do,
Oh, that song
do.
is good.
Yeah, but also
Oh, yeah.
even more the background score that I didn't even know that I knew, but of course I did. I watched 8 seasons of it over the course of 8 years, but
Right.
it really just makes the world so evocative, like y'all were
I
saying.
mean, that show defined my 30s in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it every Sunday night for years.
Think about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Soap stuff.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I read a quote today that said, "It reads like a soap opera for men because men want lots of violence, sex, swearing by female genitalia, and paper-thin motivations, right?" Which is exactly what Martin dishes up.
So many lower lips.
Yeah. Lower lips.
Also, in later later parts of the books, there's zombies, there's twins,
A person comes back from the dead more than one time.
yeah,
true.
That's very soapy.
And one time he comes back from the dead and kills the people who killed him, which is a lot.
And Melisandre being able to like look different than she like
Yeah.
have the illusion of being someone else.
when
that-
she takes off that necklace and has the crone face, that was one of my favorite.
I bet her
parts.
dogs are so weathered.
They were down real low.
Wobbling to and fro.
Do your guys, did you like the book?
I sure did.
I did too. Lord help me.
Despite everything I just said, I really like it.
I said hard to say since I love the TV show and know the plot. He's not the best prose writer, but I did not dislike this.
Yeah, that's the thing about him. He has moments where he's really good, and then moments where he's just not.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody with his level and skill in world building could never be a bad writer.
I mean, he's a world-class world builder.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
In like ways that I care about. Like I know that Lord of the Rings guy like had like, whole languages made up, but I'm just like, you know what? This is good too.
He made up languages
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, but like I feel like that's like less talked about. I don't know.
Well, one of the things I really like about the world he has built is that the history of all of the different places makes sense, and the way he and like culturally it makes sense, and it feels not. I mean, like it feels real.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like a true history, and you can see the effect of like the way they grow up or of where they live, on their language, and like the names he comes up with, and the place names he comes up with,
It's
and
so
all this
cool.
stuff. It's amazing.
The Veil of Aaron,
Come on.
Well, and that's why
So good.
again, like, another plug for House of the Dragon. I never thought that when I first heard it was going to be a prequel about the Targaryens, I was like, who gives a shit? And then I was like, more
That's why I didn't watch it.
Targaryens. No, but it's because it ties into things that you'll learn about later, and it's just, I don't know, it's so good. So
Interesting. And it's like a prequel, right?
yeah, it's they're all Rhaegars and Viserys. I don't know, but
A couple generations before the
it's about the Dance of the Dragons, the original one. There was like a feud between two of the families, the Blacks and the Greens, but it's so
God.
good. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know.
the blacks
them.
and the greens. Lori.
Those are some very simple names for this
I think
universe.
it's that's just their colors. They're all Targaryens.
I was like,
There's
Viserys
different
Green?
sects.
Yes,
Sects of them. Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, guys?
I had Lord of the Rings, I guess.
So many horses, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I said Lord of the Rings because the Dothraki are a more interesting Rohirrim to me, which are different man-horse girls.
Oh, they are interesting. Do you know that the Rohirrim in the movie was primarily portrayed by women because there just like weren't enough men who could ride hard on
that's
a
cool.
horse on
Hell
the
yeah.
movie? And
That's
so
awesome.
most of the Rohirrim, the actors are.
They already had the ponytails.
That's awesome.
That is cool.
Coming up next time, Lord of Light
Oh, phew.
by Roger Zelazny.
That's the guy.
We're doing it.
Lord of
We're gonna
Light
do-
is also from Game of Thrones.
Lord of Light is from Game of Thrones.
Different.
Boy,
different
that
Lord of
was a
Light.
dropped thread, wasn't it?
Yeah. Whoop.
The whole Lord of Light thing. And then they were just like,
Oh yeah.
is Jon Snow the Azor Ahai Rahuller
I think he's supposed to be, right?
Cthulhu?
That's the idea.
Raj Al Ghul.
I don't know.
Maybe George will do better with it in the books.
But I feel like they just like spoiler, they murdered that little girl Shireen, Stannis' daughter, and then they were like, never mind. The fire god is too upsetting.
I remember at one point in an earlier season, I was like, am I on Team Stannis? And then like the next year, I was like, oh, definitely not. He's made a huge mistake.
I think that's one of the things about reading those books is you change allegiances a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because people will do great things and they'll be like, oh, no.
There are people that name their babies Daenerys and Khaleesi, and then she like
Oh, you remember that baby name thing? And it was like, if you were born this year, what would your name be based on the popularity level?
Oh, yeah.
And my two names were Daenerys and Khaleesi.
What?
Yes.
I'd be like, I go by Lacey.
Because, my name when I was born was different. So the popularity, so like when I was born in 1983,
Oh,
my
what's-
name was
what's
like
this
the
level of popularity?
Yeah, my
Oh, got
my
it.
name was like the 800th most common baby name.
Okay.
And then when I did that baby name like comparison thing, it was one of them was Khaleesi and my other name was Daenerys. I couldn't fucking believe it. I was like, is this intelligent design? What's happening? Can't be a coincidence.
I can't tell you how many think pieces there were on Daenerys' character arc.
Oh, yeah.
People had a lot of thoughts about that.
I think even without season 8, it's complicated.
I was so mad about season 8. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was so mad.
Was that the last season?
Yeah, because they didn't earn what they did to her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To me.
They wrapped it up real quick.
They sure did.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway.
a lot of times death is just very meaningless. So maybe they were like, let's give her a regular person's death, just murdered by her
Oh,
boyfriend.
it's not that she was killed, it's that she
boyfriend,
burnt down
nephew.
King's Landing. That's what I was mad about.
Oh, remember how our cookbook has King's Landing burnt ends? Townspeople burnt ends.
A funny TikTok.
Too soon.
A funny TikTok about how many sci-fi cookbooks are like Boba Fettuccine, and it's just a fettuccine Alfredo recipe.
I think that's funny. A+ gold medal for me. Boba Fettuccine is
No notes.
hilarious.
No notes.
No.
Will I make it though? Absolutely not.
I need that.
I mean,
I gave Haley that cookbook with Boba Fettuccine in it, so you could get the recipe from
That's true. It is just every fettuccine Alfredo recipe that's ever existed.
But it's
But I
named
really like-
Boba Fettuccine.
I really like fettuccine. Anyway. Okay. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
You go, girl. You go, girl. You go, girl. A hilarious podcast.
Despite the incendiary nature of the backdrop, these three space feminists keep the ... read full review. Do you know that I just copied and pasted the snippet? ...
Dot.
Hold, please.